Hello, I see you've entered my tavern with pitchforks, knives, guns, fire. I don't even know what type of tangent I'm getting on, but dude, Expedition 33 is on the mind, man. I've been outside of the gaming space for a long time, and when I mean long time, I mean like 4 or 5 years, not even that long. But in terms of like new games, they don't really catch up unless it's something I'm really excited about. I'm not really that interested into like new IPs that come out in recent years, but dude, when a game comes along with great visuals, gameplay, storytelling, music, acting, it really just shows you what magic truly is. But tangent aside, this is not what you're here for. I'm not gonna glaze this game on a comic channel. You saw the title, you know what you're here for. Comic book accuracy. Now, I don't have a problem with comic book accuracy as you might think from seeing that title, and before you say anything, let me explain my position. I know you guys are looking at that dislike button, just let me explain my position. I don't really believe fully in like comic book accurism, like one-to-one. I believe in something I'm gonna call comic respectivism, and what that really is respecting the source material. Yes, you can change a lot of things, but everything has to be done in good faith. Everything around it, like the mythos, like the world, the story, that can change, but obviously you need to keep the core tenets intact, because if you don't, the character will just be that character in name only, and nobody wants that. We want to see at least the versions of these characters translated from the comic book page to the silver screen. Obviously that is the case. That's where accuracy, in my opinion, matters the most. Storytelling and the world itself, not really. And I'm just gonna ask you a question to kind of start off this little rant. What is the biggest and I guess the best comic book movie of 2025 so far? I'm gonna give you 10 seconds. Now I'm gonna give you 5. Go for it. It's Thunderbolts. Obviously, it's Thunderbolts. And is that film comic accurate in the slightest? No. I challenge you right now to find a Thunderbolts team that looks like this in comics. I dare you. Do it right now. You can't. It's impossible. But is the film still good? Yes, and I feel like a lot of people interchange like the words good and comic accurate respectively. I don't know why they do, because they aren't linked in the slightest. People look at Thunderbolts or Guardians of the Galaxy and they're like, these things are comic accurate, of course they're good. They are not. Pull up your phone right now, any sort of extra device, maybe you're on your laptop, whatever it is. I want you to pull up another tab, get Guardians of the Galaxy as made by James Gunn, and comic book Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't know, by Dan Abnett. That run in the 2000s during the Annihilation era. Pull those two pictures together. What do you see? I'm gonna do it for you probably. I don't know why I'm giving you instructions, but like, these two things couldn't be more completely different, especially in how they act. Obviously in volume 3 of Guardians, James Gunn gave them the more comic accurate suits, but these are two different characters. It couldn't be more different, but still, the James Gunn films are some of the best in the MCU. Going back to Thunderbolts, all of these characters in general, Yelena, Winter Soldier kinda, Ghost, all of them, Sentry, he's not accurate, but I think they were made like that for the better, right? The writers and artists and everyone involved, they were playing everything to their own strengths and to the strengths of the performers, of the actors themselves. I know a lot of people have problems with this, but if you compare something like the East and the West, right? How the East looks at comics, how they look at it from like manga to anime, they look at it more as a storyboard. They have to do one-to-one, they have to complete it fully to the best of their ability in the most creative way possible, and then they get to add whatever they want afterwards. But in the West, how we look at it is more as, I don't want to say a suggestion because that seems half-hearted, more like a framework, a frame of mind of how to progress going forward, how to maybe implement certain things, but you don't have to follow it completely. And that's what they do with somebody like Sentry, and I'm completely fine with that because I know this is blasphemy, I like MCU Sentry more than comic book Sentry, and let me explain my issues. So I like Sentry in general, but he's such a bag of wasted potential. So when he first came out in like the early 2000s by Paul Jenkins, his like original story was very creative. I feel like Miracle Man did it better, but let's just say for the sake of this video, it was very creative. I do really like how they did that little marketing ploy trying to make the audience think that he was a forgotten Golden Age character while in reality he was never there to begin with. That was brilliant, even having Stan Lee do a couple of things. But I really do hate how they did the psychic like forget all this type of stuff, when they made Sentry use his telepathy to make everybody forget that he existed, and he was a prominent hero that was like the best friend with like characters like Reed Richards and Bruce Banner. I hate that so much because when other writers go back in time to deal with the OG aspects of the Marvel Universe, they forget about it. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, but in general, they really got rid of a lot of the fluff with Sentry's character. And the problem with Sentry as he kind of got folded into the Marvel Universe, when he went into the Marvel Void, pun intended, they made him a hype moments and aura type of character. That is just a meme, but he became that over time through like Bendis and the New Avengers and a lot of the arcs and big crossover events from the 2000s and 2010s. That was his character, aside from a couple of exceptions like Greg Pak or Jeff Lemire. I really do like how Jeff Lemire in his 3, 4, 5, 6 around their issue miniseries, he had the Void and Sentry kind of come to this sort of coalescence, this agreement. They bonded, merged, and Sentry was in complete control of his mind. He had this really cool red and black suit. He had Void powers in his base Sentry form, making him more powerful and more psychologically stable. But when it came to like King in Black and Donny Cates, he completely forgot about it. He went back to his original form in that book and proceeded to get one-shotted. And granted, Donny Cates said he didn't know much about Sentry when that happened, and he did kind of remove his sins by making him a big part of his Doctor Strange run, having this really cool zombie Sentry arc. But this is the problem with making your character just a power scaling fantasy. That's who he became, and then eventually it was just the Worf effect, where they had him losing to show how powerful new or even old villains have become, to kind of show the personal story stakes. And that is what makes it so funny when I see a lot of people just clamor and glaze Sentry of how, dude, he has so many cool powers. He'll beat Thor, Hulk, he'll beat the entire Avengers, even in like the Thunderbolts movie, due to like a lot of like hyperbolic statements. People think that he would beat Thor, Hulk, and Iron Man all at once. No, he won't. He hasn't shown anything that would even make me think that, especially in base form. But people don't understand what subtext is and trying to sell your product, but whatever. And it's even more funny considering how much Thor and Hulk recently have progressed. They literally left Sentry by the wayside, right? Sentry has been dead since 2018, 2019. That is the same amount of time Alfred has been dead in comics, and Alfred is a side supporting character, and Sentry is a character with his own comic book series. He is able to hold up and maintain a solo book, and that really tells you the state of Sentry at that time. Hold up, water break. Bro, I'm getting droplets, but I need to refill. But yeah, Sentry in the film, what they did, and of course when it comes to Hollywood and why I respect and I like when people respect the source material the most instead of just doing one-to-one comic accuracy, is that obviously they want to leave their mark on the character. And Sentry in this film, the writers decide to play more to Lewis Pullman's strengths as an actor and making him more, I guess, relatable. Not really to me, but I guess in general, right? Having his like anxiety and little like quirks here and there that really made us endear to his character right off the bat. Something that I feel like really couldn't have been done if they tried to go all the way with bringing a lot of Sentry's, I guess, initial aspects and kind of like shelving and pushing it into a story that wasn't even about him. He isn't the main character. He's one of the main characters. But that is, you have to remember, it's about all of these other characters. I really loved how they pictured and they placed the entire Thunderbolts film in this area of mental health. That was what the entire film was about. And because they decided to position itself on this sort of theme, on this topic, and wow, Marvel, isn't it great how if you make a theme and something that you want to tell your audience in a film and you actually make a film, people are going to like it. Crazy, I know. But not only did it allow us to warm up to a lot of characters that were in previously not really liked Marvel films or television shows, or even people that were just very misunderstood. It got a lot of people onto their side, but it allowed us to explore the Void through what I believe to be the superior aspect of the characters when they look at him as the darker half, the darker mirror, and when they completely defeated him when Bob fought back against the Void. It was just very euphoric, right? Very empowering. And it is so much better than what they did in like later comics, which is when they made him kind of bond to this weird space alien goo symbiote style and turned him into like Space Satan. I don't know why they did that. It just made him into a worse and less introspective character. But that's what I'm really trying to get at. Of course, there's obviously pros and cons, comic book respectivism. I guess the pros is that it could really make a story that previously sucked into something that's way better. Take a Captain America Civil War. That comic is a complete edgefest. It's very convoluted with the amount of characters, and it just makes a lot of the characters completely out of character. I'm saying character too much, but that's what that comic is under Mark Miller. But under the Russo brothers, what they did, they got rid of all this sort of extra fluff. I don't know if putting the X-Men or the Fantastic Four would have made them better. I don't know that the fact that they had less characters to play with made the film better, but in general, they made it more politically, I guess, adept, right? They didn't make it completely just brains to the wall stupid, right? I understood where everybody was coming from, and it really pushed the character arcs in a way that aligned with how they were portrayed in previous movies. But then there are things like the God Butcher arc in Thor Love and Thunder, and the problem with this is that unlike comic books that can be scrubbed from the audience's memory just by them not wanting to position those stories into their collective personal canon, or maybe even through a retcon, that can't happen with a film. There is a large digital footprint with films. Obviously, going to the theater and seeing it yourself, people making discussion posts about it, reviews, videos, that will never go away. People will talk about it to the end of time. I'm sorry, Taika, what were you thinking in general, honestly, making that film? And the wasted potential with Christian Bale. Because of that film, people are going to look at that Thor storyline, one of the greatest, if not the best Thor storyline in the 21st century, in the 2010s, and people aren't going to try to adapt it the proper way. They're like, okay, somebody had their fun, they already adapted it, let me try something else. Which is good to get more variety, but I want to see a good adapted version of the God Butcher storyline, and that's not going to happen in my lifetime, and that honestly sucks. Same goes to Batman v Superman. Zack Snyder, he already used the Batman armored suit. He already seeded the Batman versus Superman aspect. In Zack Snyder's Justice League, we saw the Batmobile tank, we saw the mutants, and in general, he pulled a lot of lines from that book. So now people aren't even going to try to adapt it in live action, which is fine, considering the animated movie is so fire. But I really would have liked to see it properly done in live action. Now, there are some stories that get adapted a bit too much, and those are stories that are more like sagas. Say the Symbiote Saga. That's been adapted to death, but the reason why people adapt to it and why they're so attracted to these storylines is because there is an A point and there's a C point that has to stay the same. Those are the tenets that I was talking about, but the entire B part right here that I'm going to circle, all of that can be changed to fit the story. Like A, what's the A? The A is that he gets the symbiote from this rock, or wherever that it may came from outer space. Maybe it's from a space shuttle, whatever it is. He gets the suit, he becomes more powerful, he enjoys the benefits, then eventually, through a lot of the machinations of the 90s Spider-Man animated series and even Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, they kind of push it into the cultural zeitgeist that it actually infects your mind and makes you more violent. That never happened in the OG source material, but that is a part of it now. But what would happen is that he would become more aggressive, maybe even almost kill people and break his no-kill rule. Maybe it ruins relationships. And then the C point is him going to a church or wherever there's a giant bell, wherever that set piece is, hitting the bell, maybe with some help, him removing the symbiote, and then eventually it goes and bonds to another host and they become Venom. That are the core parts of the story. But the B part, because it was a saga, you can do whatever you want. That's what draws people towards that. And there needs to be more comic books like that. And if there are, people need to adapt those the most, because that's where this sort of respecting the source material sort of format really shines the most. However, there are sort of comic book adaptations that do happen that are one-to-one. Take Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Now, for years, people were saying that that film would be entirely impossible to make. It's impossible to adapt Watchmen because it takes full advantage of the comic book space as a medium. And Zack Snyder was like, let me pull off the impossible real quick. But the problem with it that a lot of people had is that while he did a good job emulating certain panels, he kind of glorified violence and took away a lot of the subtlety of the original book and made a lot of characters more epic and cool than they needed to be. Rorschach, I'm looking at you. But Alan Moore, you have to realize this, even in the original comic, people liked the character. Just because you like a character doesn't mean you agree with what they do. Of course, there are a lot of people like that or who are kind of like low brain celled, but either way, you have to realize if you make good character arcs and good character development and just good character work in general, Alan Moore, obviously people are going to be attracted to it. I don't know what you expected. But either way, there are stories like this where you can complain about comic accuracy. Same goes for like Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, right? James Gunn, in his plans, he was like, this is going to be a film that comes out, and obviously there is only one version of that story in comics, and he is taking inspiration from it. What I've seen through, of course, casting material, he is going to follow it one-to-one. Crypto's going to be in it, Supergirl, but there are some changes here and there, like Lobo being in it. Lobo being in the original book would have harmed it. It being in the film makes more sense because people like Lobo, people are going to show up because of Lobo. People have been clamoring for Jason Momoa to be Lobo, so obviously it makes sense. There you can complain because he is promising comic accuracy, and I wish I was in a world where a lot of comic book accurate material that was one-to-one existed, because I want people to experience the things that I did, but obviously not everybody reads comics. I would love that, but that's not the world that we live in. However, if you look at things like Daredevil Born Again, you could see, or even the Superman trailer recently, you can see little aspects where they're taking material from, right? When I was looking at the Superman trailer, which is when, of course, the time of this recording, it just came out. Ironheart also just came out. I know what you're doing, Marvel. You're trying to take heat right off of you just so that you don't get 100,000 dislikes. I haven't even seen the trailer, and I know they're trying to move the heat as far as they can. Maybe people will look at Superman more. They have completely ruined the marketing of Ironheart. Isn't it coming out next month? I don't know. Let me know down below. What a disaster. But either way, from there, I can see bits of All-Star Superman, bits of Superman Birthright, bits of Superman for all seasons, even with the political aspect and the audience, and just not the audience, and the people kind of turning on Superman and the jurisdiction aspect of the heroes. I can see Kingdom come from that. I see all the pieces, but he's kind of putting it together to form, hopefully, a greater whole. I am praying for this film to do well. I hope it does well. It's going to. It's James Gunn. But like with Daredevil Born Again, a lot of people were seeing through the trailer and obviously through the show itself, Bullseye with the tooth in his mouth and eventually killing somebody with that tooth. That is iconic. And people were trying to see where in the source material that's from, and then in Twitter, people were having all of these discussions, and then eventually you see people actually going out and buying omnibuses for Daredevil from Frank Miller, from like Chip Zdarsky, Brian Michael Bendis, Ed Brubaker. All of them, you see them buy all of these things to kind of see where it came from, and then they're actually getting a completely different experience, but one that's just as good as the show. Granted, hot take once again, I'm just full of hot takes in this video. I think that show is kind of a mess, especially considering how they really did have a lot of issues with like the new guard coming in, but the ones that the new creators did do, the Loki team, were actually really good. High hopes for season 2. But yeah, that's what I love about it when you don't fully adapt it. It's like seeing an alternate timeline, one where it's like if the comic didn't go this way, maybe it could have went that way. That's the beauty of this in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Are there any comic books that, or comic book material and movies that you know of that have followed the source material to a T, and because of that, it is made worse because of it, and when they even tried to make any sort of changes, it was so half-hearted it didn't even matter. Do you know any of those? Let me know down below. I hope you guys had a good time. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care.